Thank you all. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you so much to Elizabeth. We give you our thanks. I'm so lucky to be invited here. This month we are celebrating and honoring Latinx Heritage Culture Month. Also, give thanks to the community of the Seminary of the Southwest. On this day, we honor Thomas Gallaudet, Reverend Thomas Gallaudet, as well as the Reverend Henry Richard Syles. Now, some of you may already know that I myself am with the St. Mary's Church for the Deaf in Manhattan, in New York City, and I flew in from New York. The deaf community in New York and that particular church are so wonderful. They are a minority church, and there are just a handful of white people who attend that church. Mostly it's Latinos who attend that church. Predominantly Puerto Ricanos. There are some people from Mexico, Honduras, and Peru, and Panama as well. And Ecuador. So quite a few in that mix. That community, despite them being from different countries, moved to the United States and pick up American Sign Language. They might be from different countries in Latin America, but they all made their way to our church. Our deaf community is very warm and welcoming, as is the city of New York. So this is a very happy month to be celebrating Spanish heritage culture as well as Latinx culture. The Reverend Thomas Gallaudet was the first priest at the church where I am now. He was the very first founding priest in St. Anne's. Our church was founded October 8th, 1852, way back when. So you can imagine, that's quite some time ago. Now, October 8th was yesterday. Yes, yesterday. And my church, the Church of St. Anne, became 173 years old yesterday. Cause to celebrate, absolutely. I thank God. I thank God that we are able to continue to worship in American Sign Language. The sign language of the United States. We are so proud of our culture and of being deaf. We have such pride. Reverend Thomas Gallaudet, and let me show you his sign name. Make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. So when he was a young boy, apparently he had very wavy hair, and that's how he got his sign name, and it just stuck. So that is the sign name. Saint Gallaudet was a coda. And as some of you may you know, you may be familiar with the movie Coda. How many of you have seen that? The movie Coda? Quite a few of you, yes, yes. Elizabeth herself is a Coda because her mother is deaf. So she is a child of, so we talk about the acronym, CODA stands for Child of Deaf Adult. Reverend Thomas Gallaudet's mother was deaf. His mother was deaf and his father was hearing. Reverend Gallaudet's father was Dr. Thomas Hopkins Gallaudet. They have two different name signs, although they share the same name in English. So, father, Thomas Hopkins Gallaudet, and son, Thomas Gallaudet, Reverend Thomas Gallaudet. So, Reverend Gallaudet was a Coda, and in 1845, quite a number of years ago, he met and married a deaf woman. Her name was Elizabeth Budd. Now, if you think about this, Gallaudet, when he was growing up, had a deaf mother, so it was very natural for him to communicate in his native language, American Sign Language. That was his daily life. Reverend Gallaudet had many deaf friends, and he enjoyed associating with the deaf community and spending his time with them. Often deaf people mistook him for being deaf himself, but because he signed so well, but he was hearing. So Reverend Gallaudet was wonderful. He greatly encouraged deaf people to become teachers of other deaf people. He encouraged them to find professions and careers, for example, as seamstresses or tailors, carpenters, woodworkers. He encouraged them to find really good jobs to support themselves. He also encouraged deaf people to become priests themselves. Gallaudet encouraged one man. Of course, they were all men back then. Unfortunately, these were all men. Now, finally, at last, we have women who are also. Reverend Gallaudet encouraged one deaf man to study at the seminary to become a priest. And finally, Reverend Gallaudet convinced one deaf man. His name was Erich Krengel. He convinced Syles to enter the priesthood. Now, if you look at this book, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for loaning me this book. It's called The Missionary Chronicle, and it shows the history of how Reverend Gallaudet and the bishop of Philadelphia, that bishop's name was William Stevens. So Bishop Stevens and Gallaudet convinced Syles to study and enter the priesthood. So you see here, there's a copy. So many pages to read, so many. Bishop Stevens Stevens had an extremely long sermon listing out his reasons why Syles should be ordained, that this deaf man should be ordained. And he went on and on for quite a long time. I promise I will not preach as long. So he had such a long sermon because he wanted the hearing people who were listening to not be able to change anyone's mind about this. So Bishop Stevens, William Stevens, explained in his sermon that for so many years, hundreds of years, that people were following the teachings of Aristotle, as well as St. Augustine. And these two were very learned men. However, they both said that deaf people cannot learn, and you cannot teach a deaf person to read. I was shocked that these two learned men discriminated against deaf people. They thought that deaf people could not learn, they could not go to school, they could not take Holy Communion because they could not say or speak the word amen, which would prohibit them from taking communion. Now, luckily, the Catholic Church established schools for the deaf to teach deaf children to learn to read, to learn to write, to become learned men themselves. Eventually, a school for the deaf was established in Hartford, Connecticut, which I live now, and that school was called the American School for the Deaf. And that school was the first established in the United States to teach deaf people to read and write using American Sign Language. Deaf people could learn, they could receive Holy Communion. However, at the time, it was still questionable whether or not a deaf man could become a priest. Now, Bishop William Stevens, the Bishop of Philadelphia, he started a new tradition for the Episcopal Church. Bishop Stevens listened to the words of Jesus. Jesus, who welcomed the deaf man into the community. That is from our reading of the Gospel of Mark today. The Gospel showed Jesus healing the deaf man. However, Bishop Stevens, the Bishop of Philadelphia, did not use this particular passage from the Gospel of Mark. He took from the Gospel of Luke to support his ideas of ordaining Syles. And Bishop Stevens talked about Zechariah, who was the father of John the Baptist. Zechariah, in the Gospel of Luke, Zechariah was in the temple praying, and an angel came to him. An angel named Gabriel visited him in the temple and said, "Your wife, Elizabeth, will be pregnant." Now, Zechariah did not believe Gabriel. He thought, this cannot be. So the angel, in his anger, punished Zechariah. He punished him by taking away his power of speech. For 9 months during the term of his wife's pregnancy, he could not utter a word. That was the Gospel of Luke, first chapter. It says, he, Zechariah, could not speak to the people. Zechariah kept motioning to them, and yet remained unable to speak. They used the word motion with his hands, and the people could not understand him. Imagine, for 9 months during the term of his wife's pregnancy, he could not use speech. When the baby was born, which was John the Baptist, the people said, "What will you name him?" And Zechariah took out and wrote, his name is John. And at that moment, he could speak. He could finally use his voice. He said, yes, his name is John, at last. Now, this simple pad of paper and his pen. For me, these 2 items for me. Okay, now let me take you back to COVID, when COVID first hit. You all remember? What did we all do? We wore masks everywhere. You remember that? As a deaf person, here I am trying to read people's lips and trying to understand what they're saying behind a sea of masks. And every day I went out armed with my pad and pen and wrote notes to people back and forth about what I wanted or what I needed to do. I want to buy this, or I need this much ham. Can you cut for me, please? 1 pound. Back and forth. I wrote notes with my paper and pen. I had the same experience as Zechariah. Syles, the deaf man, he studied hard. He continued to his studies and persevered. He attended Trinity College, again in Hartford, where I live. I've actually seen Trinity from Yale in 1869. As well as a Master's of Arts degree, again from Yale in 1872. Bishop William Stevens and Reverend Gallaudet encouraged Syles to study for holy orders. He did indeed study. He did a whole lot of studying, didn't he? Bishop William Stevens recognized his effort and how intelligent this deaf man was. And he knew the Bible so well. He could also sign his sermons and share the gospel of Jesus to deaf people in their own language, in a way they could understand. All of this education and ability of Henry Winfield Syles was used to so clearly express the good news of Jesus to deaf people. This so clearly convinced Bishop Stevens to ordain him as the first deaf deacon. Yes! Now this happened October 8th. October 8th, yesterday, in the year 1876. 149 years ago, yesterday. Yes. Syles to be ordained as such. And guess what? I have actually just learned that later, June 17, 1988, in the exact same church, where Henry Syles was ordained, where he became a deacon. That church is called St. Stephen's Church in Philadelphia. So in that same church where he became a deacon, in 1988, a deaf woman became the first deaf woman to become a priest in the same church. That's amazing. And her name was Reverend Virginia Nagel. I call her Ginger. She is so sweet, wonderful woman, just an amazing person. And she was ordained in the same exact church as Reverend Syles. That's amazing. So October 8th, 1876 and June 17, 1988, those 2 dates are so extremely precious and important and valuable for the deaf community, for our deaf church. Philadelphia, that same church in St. Stephen's, which is in Philadelphia, is such an important place. Jesus heals the deaf man, but St. Paul wrote, through hearing, we develop faith. Faith through hearing. And that is Romans chapter 10, verse 17. Paul writes to the church in Rome, and he says, so faith comes from hearing. Okay, now, Aristotle and St. Augustine, remember, they both said that deaf people cannot learn. They cannot be intelligent because they cannot hear. Well, thank goodness we know they were wrong. School, thanks to the Schools for the Deaf, initially established in France and eventually here in the United States, helped deaf people to learn to read and write. Reverend Gallaudet, Reverend Syles, as well as Reverend Nagel, preach to convince deaf people to follow Jesus and accept the love of God. And today, we recognize the gift. What a special, incredible gift we have been given from God. And that gift is American Sign Language, ASL. That gift is such a special gift for deaf people. Sisters and brothers with Jesus, all in the family of God. Jesus welcomes the deaf man into the family of God. Jesus said, be open. Be open. Open our hearts. Let our hearts open. Let our minds open. Let our hearts be open because God is with us today. And God opens our hearts, our minds. And so importantly, God opens our eyes to see and so that we can all sign together and say, thanks to God. So let's everyone sign that together. Thanks be to God. Amen.